as I say, camellia breeding triumphs. And the history in China really begins with the cultivation of the tea plant, Camellia sinensis. The first written accounts are not until about 5,000 years ago, but we know that tea was present before that in China. I just love this photo I found on the internet. It's not an old picture, it's a relatively new one, but it really shows the gorgeous terraced tea plants in China. It's just a very nice photo. So tea is the #1 cultivar in China for long periods of time. But I begin to ask myself and other people, and who was the first camellia hybridizers? And my guess is it might have been a Buddhist monk in China or a samurai warrior in Japan. But my actual preference, I think it's probably some farmer or some woman who was harvesting seeds for edible camellia oil and probably planted them near her home. Of course, there's no documentation of any of this, but having grown up, or my grandparents were on farms, men and women worked really hard on farms and were very creative in harvesting crops and knowing how to do seeds. And I don't know why that wouldn't have happened thousands of years ago in China and in Japan and other countries. What we do know is that there are ancient Camellia reticulatas in China. The written records begin in about 1550. And the one that I've put up here is just sort of an example of an ancient cultivar from Hunan, China. We call it lionhead. And you can see a nice picture of the tree and of the individual flower. But it's sort of as a placeholder for the many old reticulatas, which probably have some C. Pottardii in them. I found this interesting. The book I have is called Hunan Camellias, and it's written by the Chinese, but I have an English translation. And they document in this book that there were bud mutations of camellias. And they list a bunch, all of them are variegated. And so I put up cornelian. I'm going to use the English names rather than the Japanese names. I mean, the Chinese or the Japanese names. What makes sense, those of us are very, very familiar with viruses these days. But a scientist, what I'm basically saying is they thought a bud mutation was a new cultivar. We know now it's not a mutation, it's a virus plant of lionhead. And there's several other examples. But it's because they didn't know about viruses. The first virus, as I understand it, documentation was in about late 1800s, when one of the scientists was putting a fungus tobacco leaf through a filter, and it still remained infected. And this is really the beginning of viruses. And it's the literature I look at, the first time you really begin to talk about viruses and camellias isn't until 1940. So a lot of these plants have been called mutations. In fact, you look at some of the older books and they'll call these mutations. If they mean a genetic mutation, that's not correct. As you all know, it's virus, because if we planted seeds from Demano, cornelian, whatever name we use, it's still lionhead. But I thought it was interesting that there's no reason they would know about viruses, because they weren't available in the scientific literature or any other literature. Now, the first Hunan reticulata that moved anywhere was Captain Raw's, and the data seems to show that it got to Japan in the middle of the 1600s, and then England in 1820, and excuse my little misprint, that in America sometime before the reticulatas came to Descanso. I put this up this afternoon. I should have proofread myself. The other interesting thing, let me see if I can get rid of the pictures here, and they're sort of, yeah, that's good. Probably the first breedings of camellias were mass plantings by the Kunming Botanical Institute. They planted thousands and thousands of seeds, and then, of course, picked the best ones to propagate. And I use it as a placeholder Confucius because it was sent to America in 1950 to Descanso. You know, people are still using planting mass plantings. For those of you who know, a lot of Nuccio's introductions are really mass plantings, but they're in pots, and that's how they select them. And we have a woman named Pam Johnson in the South who plants thousands of seedlings and produces lots of nice flowers. But this is the first indication of the propagation and hybridizing of the Reticulatas, Confucius. I'm highlighting Howard Asper for several reasons. Howard Asper was the curator at Descanso in 1948 when Manchester Bodie and Dr. Lametz brought the Hunan cultivars to America. And Howard Asper quickly picked up Buddha as one of the same ones that came in 1950. And he crossed a Salionensis with C. reticulata. And, you know, we still see Valley Knudsen. It's really a nice flower. So this is sort of one of the first American crosses, and it's a beautiful little flower. Well, not so little, a nice flower. The other cross he did that is so popular still today, but it's a cross between Crimson Rose and Tiffany, and it's again sort of shows us that crosses that were being made between Japonica and C. reticulata. And, you know, a lot of several hundred, maybe 500 different cultivars. What I like about it is it's a beautiful formal double flower, which is pretty rare in reticulatas. And then when sometimes it's variegated, it's absolutely stunning. I think they call that the Newman's variegation, because not all variegation is the same, as you know. This is Howard Asper's. What I've tried to do is find pictures. You know, before we all have cell phones and digital pictures, and we have good ways to ship them around to our family and friends and everywhere, but it's much harder in the old days. So this came out of a newspaper, and it's J. Howard Asper. But the flower I took in Nuccio's this winter, and I thought it was a spectacular, and then luckily a couple bees came in and made it interesting. So that's the man, Howard Asper, and that is the flower he named for himself. Frank Purcell, who some of you may know or did know, lived in Northern California, lived in Grants Pass, retired, I believe, to the south. I was sent this picture from the American Camellia Society as Jean Purcell. I think it's the flower Jean Purcell, and I believe it's his wife, Jean Purcell. I don't know, Don. I asked you, I didn't get a response, but my guess is it's Jean Purcell, the flower, and his wife, Jean Purcell.
Yes, it is.
Again. And here's Frank Purcell with John Wang, a nice young version of John. Again, to give you a picture of who the people are if you haven't met them, because I'm always interested in what people look like as well as the flowers they produced. I think one of his last cultivars was one of his best, and that's Linda Carroll that he introduced in 1995. I think it's his last. I grow it. I love it. I think it's a beautiful reticulata, wonderful color, great size. Here you can see it sort of open and still sort of closed or not quite fully open. But it's a beautiful flower, nice size, grows nicely. Jack Mandrich, also up in your area, was an avid and prolific hybridizer with reticulatas especially. And I again found this picture, and I think the best one he produced was the one he named for himself. So that's Jack, and there's the flower Jack Mandrich. Down here in Arcadia, in the 70s and 80s, Meyer Pete, who lived in Arcadia, and his friend Lee Gator bred lots of camellias in his backyard. And I picked Larry Pete. Here is sort of the open, it's a rose form, so the bud form, rose form, named for his son. It is still a very, very nice camellia. A lot of people think it's his best or best reticulata, Probably more famous, or one more points, was his Emma Gator, which I picked the Emma Gator variegated. Emma Gator is named for Lee Gator's wife, Emma. And, you know, before Frank Hauser, it was the winning flower, at least in California. Now we don't see it quite so often, but they're both really nice reticulatas. I did meet Maya Pete, but I'm much more familiar with Bev Pete. Bought her in her home here in Arcadia, and then I came back 4 or 5 times to get cuttings, talk to her, get to know her. And this is Bev Pete herself. She's holding Bev Pete variegated. And for those of you who know about Bev Pete Smiles, that's her smile. And it was Conrad Hooper who actually introduced Bev Pete Smiles, but it's a Maya Pete's introduction. And I'm glad he was able to, he got scions from Meyer and he grew them. Bev Pete also has passed away. The house got demolished and all the camellias ripped out after she sold the house and moved to be with family in San Diego. Dr. Walter Hohlmeier is really one of the great hybridizers. Here we see him pictured. That's Frank Hauser in the orangey red or red colored jacket, and that's Walter Hohlmeier in the purple. They are both physicians. They were neighbors, lived next door to each other, and you're probably familiar that they were looking over seedlings when Frank Hauser, what became known as Frank Hauser, was a seedling, and Frank really liked it, so Walter named it after his friend Frank Hauser. And as you know, it's just about the most winning reticulata in all the shows, whether you're in Northern California, Southern California, or somewhere in the South. One of its big competitors, of course, is the variegated form. Walter, Dr. Hohlmeier, also introduced Terrell Weaver in 1974. It's named for one of his good friends, Terrell Weaver, who, as I understand, was also a president of the American Camellia Society. So it's a nice big red one. Some of the information I got about Dr. Hohlmeier, I thank his son Chris, tuned me into some things. I put up Walter Hohlmeier, even though it was bred by Hewland Smith, for 2 reasons. One is Walter, but as a breeding pioneer or as an asset, when you get reticulatas with this nice sheen or frosting. I don't know who's the first person to have frosting, but you'll see it in Hewland Smith's introductions. And I think it's another added feature to reticulatas that make them interesting and beautiful. Hewland Smith, as you probably know, is a prolific hybridizer, a president of the American Camellia Society, and he really loved big red flowers, and this is one of his favorites that he named for his friend Ray Gentry. Huge, big, beautiful flower. Now we switch to Nuccio's nursery, because whether we're talking about reticulatas, japonicas, or hybrids, the Nuccios have winners in every category. And 2 of their older ones that have been around a long time are Franciella on the left and Curtain Call, which is a nice big reticulata. I grow both, although my Franciella is also variegated. But these are great introductions from the Nuccios. I thought you might enjoy this photograph from a newspaper of the Nuccios in 1990. You may recognize Jude, his dad, Joe, who co-founded the nursery. This is Jim. This is his dad, Julius, and Tom. They don't look the same anymore, but I thought it was a nice picture to get them. As you know now, it's Tom and Jim that are running the nursery. The other men, unfortunately, are no longer with us. We saw John Wang's picture, but we really have to acknowledge John Wang's pioneering triumphs in breeding reticulatas. You know, he really decided that the genetic loading of red in retics was so high, he had to do something about it. He had 2 strategies, which you may be familiar with. One is to reduce the amount of reticulata to 25%, still listed as a retic, or to use Kona and other white Japonicas like Kona with Suzanne Withers. And this is what this one is. And this is a really, I grow it, I enjoy it. I think it's one of John's best. There's a lot of new ones he comes out, but he ships them to China. They're not as well distributed, but this is definitely a good example of the pioneer work that John has done with reticulatas. Here's John. I got some better pictures because, you know, we have digital photos, and I'm pretty sure this is in his garden, and this is more or less how John looks these days. But again, it's nice to be able to have the people and their flowers where before we lose them as people and not able to take their pictures anymore. And John's going strong. He's still breeding lots of good stuff. This is one I just got from the Nuccios this year, and I'm very pleased with it. It's in the nomenclature, and it's listed under tinges of yellow and purple. The Chinese name, Wao Hong Wei Z, is hard for those of us, but it's a beautiful white reticulata with a little yellow. You can see tints of it, and I don't know that I'd call it purple or lavender, but it's a beautiful medium formal double flower, a beautiful example of some of his earlier work. Now we're going to switch to Japonicas, because the Camellia Japonica has as long a history as the reticulatas, and we're going to focus more of a history in Japan. You know, you have to use written records. The material I use is from a book by the Japanese Camellia Society that was written in Japanese, but it's been translated into English and proofread by Pat and Herb Short. And this is where I got a lot of my information on the early Japonicas. So the early records are the Edo period, the 1600s to the 1800s, and they document that there were lots of camellia gardens and new cultivars being developed even at that point. So it goes back even before that. And I've picked Doconglera, as we call it, because it is the first Japonica that made it to well, no, it's from Japan to Europe. The story goes that a German physician who actually worked for a Dutch company took it to Belgium. But if you go back, the first alboplano went to China, from China, excuse me, to England earlier than this. But this is the first Japonica that came out of Japan to the Western world, and it's everywhere. Now, again, they didn't know about, this is always a variegated flower, and we call it Doconglera red. But the odds are very good, I think, that the red was actually the original flower, and somebody somehow was able to virus it way back when, way before 1800, because it came to Europe in 1834, and it's been around before that. So whether it be China or Japan, the virus was around for many, many years. It's hard to think about, not to mention the Japanese tea ceremonies that evolved and the ceremonies that have gone along with it in Japan. And it's a beautiful ceremony. The picture on the left was taken in the Huntington. It's a more modern version and a demonstration. And then if you were a wealthy family in Japan, you might have your own ceremonial tea house set in a garden center, like the picture on my right. That is from the Storia Stern garden in Pasadena. And it's open in limited hours on Sundays and certain Sundays. But it's sort of the kind of setting that might occur in Japan or elsewhere. It was a private garden in Pasadena for many years, and now is a public garden. Beautiful little setting. It's only takes about 20 minutes to go through the whole garden, but it was a beautiful home garden, like many that would also be in Japan now and in the thousands of years ago. We also know that while Camellia grisei was harvested for oil and lots of other things in China, in Japan they used the Japonica And I need to credit Jennifer Trahane, who took this picture of the harvesting of pods for oil in Japan. Mr. Yadamusa came to the United States in early 1900 as a 24-year-old man and began to import camellias to his nursery. He called it Star Nursery. And he really is not very well recognized, but he really had a big impact in distributing camellias in California. And I'm glad to be able to show you Bernice Bodie. Like a lot of the Japanese Americas in 1941-42, they were interred. And as you probably know or remember, Manchester Bodie bought most of Star Nursery's stock, and Mr. Jones, the president of Atlantic Richfield, also bought plants and seeds. The records I have indicate that the seeds were from Star Nursery to Jones, and then propagated by and named Bernice Bodie by Manchester Bodie. And it's still a beautiful flower, and it's very easily seen at Descanso and other places. And it's also a very key one for breeding, because Dr. Parks, who was at the Los Angeles Arboretum, was quite familiar with the flower and took it with him in his breeding program when he moved to North Carolina, excuse me. And I think his best, and certainly one of his most popular, is April Remembered. And you can sort of see the resemblance to one of its parents. The other one is also similar color. Here's Dr. Walter Homeyer on the left, and Dr. Parks. You probably know that Dr. Parks recently passed away, and I'm pleased to say that the Camellia nomenclature has a dedication written by the Shorts of Clifford Parks. And I was able to collect a lot of his flowers to give him a tribute, because he's one of our last great hybridizers, because both of these men, as you know, have passed into the camellia heaven. Dr. Homeyer did a lot with Japonicas, and again, I want to thank his son Chris. For example, Dahlonega is spelled with the two H's because that's the way the Cherokees called gold. Whereas the small town in Georgia doesn't have the second H in it, and that's where the first, some of the gold mine, first gold rush, and a mint was, U.S. mint was also in Dahlonega. Edna Bass is a flower that he produced. I don't see it too often. It was named for Walter's aunt, probably his favorite aunt. And then I thought, let's get a nice pink formal double in there. Elizabeth Weaver, named for Terrell Weaver's wife. And of course, Elizabeth and Walter were friends also. There's absolutely no way you can overlook Nursery and Sawadar's contributions. Now, there's a Japanese and American who really was protected by the local people. He did not get interred, and he was saved from that unfortunate event. But he introduced over 30 cultivars, and here I'm illustrating not all of them, obviously. This is Swadar's mahogany, which kind of got lost, has a nice color, very uneven flower, it goes all over the place. His Victory White, and his Tiny Princess. Tiny Princess is little, but here it's lavender, sometimes it's lighter color, but it is a beautiful, beautiful flower. Here he is, a picture that I got. Nice looking man, a real strong American. He named his sons George for George Washington, Ben for Ben Franklin. Unfortunately, after Ben was born, his wife died. And as you probably know the story, when she came over from Japan, she brought 500 or so seeds, and that was part of his beginning of his hybridizing program. Later in life, he did get remarried, but the story goes that George and Kay Swader raised the family. And when we were in Mobile, we met some of they must have been the grandchildren, and they're all really nice American, Japanese American people, well educated and very personable. A great hybridizer. And of course, everyone knows and should know Swada's Dream is awarded the prestigious Ilg Seedling Japonica Award from the American Camellia Society. It is just one of those beautiful medium formal double flowers, white with the pink edge. It's just a great bloom. Now, when we come to the Nuccios, they've won 15 Ilg Seedling Japonica Awards over the year. I'm not going to show you all of them, but let's look at a few of the most of their ones. This is sort of the red page, you might say. This is Julius Nuccio, relatively new, named after Julius, to honor him. He would not allow them to name one when he was before he retired. When he retired, Jude and Tom and Jim went ahead and named this Julius Nuccio. Here's Red Hots. That's also a winning small red, beautiful little flower. A very large red flower is Grand Prix. And of course, Black Magic, one of the most beautiful, frustrating flowers to grow because it deadheads, it drops off, bull noses. But when it does its thing, it is a beautiful flower and can be even more attractive than the one I show here. But it's a distinctive medium dark red flower. And then I call Cherry's Jubilee the most delicious flower ever introduced. He also won Ilg's Award with Nuccio's Gem, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. You know, Nuccio's Gem is just a beautiful medium to large formal double. Grows well, very nice. Elegant Champagne did not win an Ilg's Award, but it won the Sewell Mutin Award. I think it's the most beautiful of all the elegants. It mutated from Elegant Splendor, which is also a beautiful flower. But Elegant Champagne is just a wonderful big white anemone bloom. And another kudo to the Nuccios for capturing it as a sport. It's just so hard to go by Nuccios without seeing so many beautiful flowers. There's variegation that's genetic, like this one. That's Ferris wheel, relatively new. And their Happy Harlequin also has variegation that's genetic. But then there's the virus variegation. I took this one this year, and it's Wildfire. Excuse me, I'm losing the name. It's not Wildfire. Highly variegated flower. I'm sorry, I'm blocking on the name at this second. You all know what it is.
Fire Dance.
Yeah, Fire Dance. Thank you very much. Senior moments occur these days. Fire Dance is a beautiful red flower, but here it is, highly variegated. You know, when you get a flower that's that variegated, it's just a treat to be able to enjoy it. Nuccios did other things besides grow them and breed them, but they imported, as you're probably familiar with, Tamanoora, and then they used it to breed a lot of other white bordered camellias. My favorite is Tama Peacock, and they have won Catherine Lee Marbury Awards to Nuccios 5 times, and one of them is Tama Peacock. Timber Americana didn't win, but I put it up because A, I grow it, and B, it's the one that has the most white of their 9 different Tamanoora seedlings. And again, a great achievement, both to import things that are important to us and have become part of our heritage, and to grow new ones also. And now we're going to shift gears to Mccaskill Gardens. Vern Mccaskill and his Mccaskill Gardens here in Pasadena introduced about 70, maybe more camellias. Here it's illustrated by Demitas. Sorry that it has Don Bergamini's credit here since he's watching, but this is one of the most unique in flowers. It doesn't usually look this great, but when it does, It is truly a unique, awesome flower. The words unique and awesome are vastly overused in our culture, but I say Demitasse is an awesome and truly unique bloom. And thanks, Don and Mary, because this is really a wonderful example. But Vern also bred a lot of other good flowers. Cottontail, these are Tyler Miniature Awards. Cottontail on the left, of course, and Little Red Riding Hood on the right. Again, I found a picture of Edwards Metcalf. He was the president of the Southern California Camellia Society. Here he's the ex-president, and he's giving an award, the Hertrick Award, to Billy, that's Vern's wife, Billy, for Sultan, which is not well known these days, and there's Vern. So we get Billy and Vern, but this is Billy Mccaskill, the flower, and is really a very pretty flower. And it's nice to be able, again, to put, you know, Billy, the flower, and Billy, the woman, and Vern, to see their pictures. Wonderful little camellia. Back to Hewlin Smith, prolific hybridizer, named a lot of camellias for his family. This is one of his best ones, named for his daughter Lauren Smith Tudor. And we see it more in the southeast than we see here, but it's a lovely, lovely bloom. The one I like the best is this little one, Tudor Baby, and Tudor Baby variegated. I think you all know the story, but if someone hasn't heard it, I'll briefly tell it. Hewlin loved big red flowers. He found this one in his greenhouse in the back. It was scrawny, a very late bloomer sometimes. And anyway, he threw it in the creek. And fortunately, friends pulled it back out. And when it's variegated, I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful flower. In fact, I picked one today, and I have another one on the bush today. So it's a late bloomer. I think it's a good candidate to jib for those of us who wanted in shows earlier in the year. And again, Tudor Baby is Lauren Tudor's child, or Hewlin's grandchild. I'm a fan of Higos. In fact, the last time I saw you in person, I believe that's what I presented, was on the Higos. What we know is that the originator of Higos is unknown. They were first written about in 1829. The gardener who wrote about them was tending about 30 camellias in a wealthy person's garden. So they go way back. Exactly how they originated isn't known. And here is just a wonderful example, a sago or morning glory, to sort of represent Higos. We do know that the Higo sumari improved and developed the size and form of these single flowers. And this is a good example showing a hake. You know, what I like about this flower is the beautiful color. But look at those stamens. That's what you want. But you also have the triangular shape that they were seeking in the classic Higo, with 3 large petals out of the 5. It's just a very good flower and very different from other Japonicas. And my personal favorite is Okan. I have a whole bunch. I like to bonsai it. But what's important, I think, too, is that the Higo Society has been only around since 1958. And they set up to evaluate new Higos. There must be 100 of them in propagation, and it must stay the same. I forget now if it's 5 years or 7 years they evaluate them. What's important is that you keep the same form. Like Okan is a mutation, and to make sure it is stable as this size, form, and color, they evaluate it. So that they've really done a great service to the Higo grouping of flowers. Here's my King's Crown or Okan bonsai at different years. Some years are better than others. Different flowers are better, but it's pretty stable, and it's really a very nice Higo. Now we switch to gears again to the hybrids. Hybrids may have occurred many, many years ago, but in Japan, the 50s, and I don't think China was much before that. So the ones that we, at least in English world, and probably document in history, are the Williams-I hybrids. And as you may know, J.C. Williams supported forest trips to China, 6-7 trips to Japan and China, and brought back the Camellias cellulonensis seeds, and they propagated them, and in 1940, the year after J.C. Williams died, they introduced this first one as J.C. Williams to honor him. So these are the first interspecies hybrids that are well documented. One of the most famous ones is by Clark, and it's called Donation. We're pretty sure that Clark got the seeds from Williams, so he named the flower Donation. And it's been very popular. That's a picture of Donation in the Portland Japanese garden. And there's a picture, I think I took that in Brittany, France. But the point is, Donation's been around a long time and is really a very nice hybrid camellia, non-retic hybrid. As you know, we separate the retics because of their size. There's absolutely no way you can forget and pioneering significant breakthrough and a triumph of hybridizing when he developed the cold hardy breeding program that he had in the Arboretum and then in his home in Ashley. And so he extended where camellias had grown to what he calls beyond the camellia belt. That's the name of his book that documents the program. And it is a very good book to have, and just glad to get a picture of him. This is when he's retired, and he's on the older side. I don't see many, as I may have mentioned before. This is the one I see in the Huntington, because you and I don't need cold hardy camellias. They need them in Maryland and New York and Pennsylvania and other places that are colder. But it's a beautiful plant, blooms very freely, and is a nice flower. I'm not going to show you the 40 or 50 of his that he introduced, but Ashton Candy took my eye when I was in March, the last time I traveled because of COVID, a little over a year ago. I saw Ashton candy cane. And I took its picture and I thought, isn't that a beautiful little flower? It's actually a medium flower. And I picked Ashton Ballet because Dr. African's wife, Kitty, says this was his favorite. But we need to remember that before he did cold hardy, he was doing other hybridizing. And these are, I think, 3 of his nicest ones. And that's cinnamon, they're the fragrant ones, cinnamon cinny, fragrant pink, which is very prolific, small flower, and a really cute flower with good cinnamon fragrance, cinnamon sensation. James Finley spent 30 years hybridizing with Camellia lucianensis and bred many, many fragrant camellias. I think the best and the highlight of his career as a hybridizer is his introduction of high fragrance. It's a beautiful flower and it's nice fragrance. 2 downsides. It's not always so beautifully even as this. It's somewhat irregular. And it doesn't really bloom well until it's old. The other thing I noticed, when we had 112, 113 degree heat here 2 years ago, it's one that really took the heat badly and burned up. It did also in the Nuccios. This year, it's just fine. It recovered beautifully and bloomed well. But it's definitely one of the great camellias that's fragrant, from James Finley. I love these pictures. They're Jim Fitzpatrick and his daughter, Molly, and her husband, Brandon, Slavinsky took these pictures. They are working on a video of the Nuccio nursery. My wife and I get to help them screen it about a month from now, and we hope to be able to share it with all of you in the near future. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment, but you can see Brandon's photograph really good. And this is, of course, the way Jim and Tom look today. And that's why we wanted the video of them, because, you know, the baby here is 72 years of age. It's not going to be forever that they're going to be with us. So we want to really document this world famous family and their camellias that they've introduced. To me, that one of their great non-retic hybrids is Island Sunset. I just love that. It's a beautiful coral color and a nice growing camellia. Another one of their non-retic hybrids that's very, very popular and very prolific is the small formal double buttons and bows. Just a lovely, lovely camellia. I'm certainly not going to show you all the ones that they've introduced, but a selection. Buttermint, and you notice that's the way it grows. It's a cluster booming, and it will bloom up and down the stem, and a nice light yellow color, buttermint. And then the one that was named after Joe Nuccio, a nice medium incurved petal formal double. And then Lucky Star is just a beautiful flower. And I think I saw Don Lesmeister in the audience, and we have to give kudos to Don because he variegated this with his method that he calls the tie-in method, and it is a spectacular variegation. I have a plant I got from the Nuccios, and it's wonderful variegation, and it's a stunning addition to have it variegated. If I have to decide whether I like Spring Days better or Island Sunset, I have a hard time deciding which is my favorite. Earlier in the season, it was definitely Island Sunset. Today, I'm still picking Spring Days and enjoying them. This is when it's open form, and this is on the cover of the American Camellia Journal this year, this last edition, and it's a spectacular color. This is the third form, the one that's sort of in between. This is sort of a just nice Spring Days, and this is what I call the third form. Not very spectacular, not as interesting as this. And then it also comes as a formal double, and I've had it natural, I've had it jibbed, I've had it early, I have late, and I know that some of you have also had Spring Days in formal double. They're really very, very distinct. They don't even look like the same cultivar to me, but they are. Beautiful. Kramer Brothers is probably most famous for their Kramer Supreme Japonica, and as a landscape plant, but I like Coral Delight and Coral Light variegated because of their introduction of the coral colors into hybrid camellias. The other thing I like about Coral Delight is it's semi-dwarf, so it does well under a window or someplace where you don't want it to take over the yard. And the variegated form is just beautiful, don't you think? I think it's just a lovely addition. I never met David Feathers, but I think I got to know him through his book. And it's a classic book out of print. Was able to find this picture somewhere or other. And I like his flowers, this demure, kind of irregular, but a sweet lavender pink color. And then his small but very nice tulip time. Here it is an espalier in France, and that thing was awesome plant. It took over this small building or barn, and it's just covered this, as the espalier just covered the structure. What they told us is they have to prune it after it blooms, or it just take over. And then, of course, it gives it time to get new growth and and to have flowers the next year. Australia is the other country, besides New Zealand and America and some of Europe, to introduce some lovely new camellias. And I picked E.G. Waterhouse and E.G. Waterhouse variegated because they really honor Ebbingauer Waterhouse. No wonder he called himself E.G., right? That's just a mouthful to say. But he was a very good hybridizer, but he also was a cornerstone in starting the Australian Camellia Society and in helping and founding the International Camellia Society. And I understand his garden was one of the most beautiful in Australia. When I was doing this presentation or preparing it, I have pictures that come onto my screensaver as a screensaver that the company puts up, Google or somebody, and this is what came up. So I found it on the internet and thought this is my introduction to New Zealand camellias. You cannot go anywhere in New Zealand or think about camellias without recognizing the Jury family as Camellia hybridizers. Felix Jury focused on breeding formal double hybrids, and here are two of his most beautiful: Dreamboat with incurved lavender pink, and the water lily also lavender pink and curving. Two just outstanding cultivars. His younger brother, I think I have this corrected, he's the younger brother, Les, also was an excellent breeder, and that's Mona Jury, then Jury's Yellow, and Anticipation. Anticipation was kind of a breakthrough getting red into the non-retics, not a breakthrough in reticulatas, but in the non-retics. I always like this picture. That's a picture of my wife's purse with Jury's Yellow and some berries and things that one of the people picked as several of us were walking around. I think the Shans were there and the Lesmeisters, I think, were there. Anyway, the point is that it is just a lovely flower that Les Jury did. We don't see Mark Jury, I believe, lives with his wife Abby on the original property that the Jury family owned since the 1870s. This is where Felix and his wife Mimosa built the house and the garden. We don't see his flowers, but he's introduced a bunch. We don't see them because it's so hard to get plants into this country and to propagate them. It's just too hard to do anymore. But he's sort of continuing the tradition. You cannot overlook the beautiful dark red camellias that Osbloom Hart developed out of Kurotu Shibaki, the black camellia. We don't see black opal anywhere near as often as Night Rider, but they certainly are triumphs in breeding to get that beautiful black color, black-red color into nice flowers, which, as you know, with they both have red roots, and their new growth is a nice red color too. Beautiful little cultivars. He also introduced lavender swirl, which I have become very fond of. I got a nice pot of this a couple of years ago from the Nuccios. It has bloomed and bloomed and bloomed. I picked 3 of them today, and this is April. Now, the only good reason we're having flowers right now is it's cool here in Southern California. It hasn't hit the 80s and 90s like it sometimes does. But again, what a gorgeous, this lavender pink colors that we see in the non-retics just have added so much to our hobby. Neville Hayden, I have met a couple times in international camellia meetings, once here in Los Angeles, and then somewhere in Europe, I forget which time. When Neville was 90, he was awarded the Queen's Award for horticultural achievements. He was an accountant by trade, and I believe this is his garden, and I believe he's holding his favorite camellia. He has passed away. He also gave a nice endowment to the International Camellia Society to work on petal blight. This is his flower, Takiani. I know that some of you, I know Don has won shows down here in Southern Cal with this flower. It's a nice flower that he bred. A more interesting story, but not necessarily any more interesting flower, is Dancing Blaze. I saw it down in Carol South and Jerry South's garden in Florida. But my understanding is Neville sent scions to Hewland Smith. Hewland Smith had no rootstock, so he gave it to his friend in Valdosta, who did propagate it and named it after the Valdosta cheerleader. I'm trying to think of his name. It's not coming to me. You all know him too.
Mark Crawford.
Thank you, Don. Mark Crawford. When we get to Japan, there's several people who have done wonderful introductions of yellow camellias, and we thank again the Nuccios for importing them. Kazuo Yoshioka is represented here by Kogen Nishiki, which you can see the hybrid. You can see the yellow flower and the red stripes from the flower. Nishiki means brocade, but sometimes it's translated metallic gold fabric, sometimes golden brocade. But you know, it's a beautiful little flower. And Tadao Yamaguchi is illustrated here, but I think it's my favorite yellow camellia. Again, these are a lot of his flowers are also available at Nuccio's, and this is Yellow Melody. It's a rose form, but you can see here I was able to capture it with in a sort of a before it opened, and it sort of stays in a formal double form many times. Beautiful yellow with the little peach cover edging, excuse me. Well, Dr. Parks may no longer be with us, but several of his yellow crosses, hybrids are becoming popular. Solstice is on the left and Optical Illusion on the right. Gene Phillips took this picture of Optical Illusion, and a lot of people are very, very fond of Optical Illusion. It seems to be one that's becoming very popular. This is the latest breakthrough, the latest triumph in camellia hybridizing. It's summer, remondant, repeat blooming camellias from China's Palm Landscape Company. They're on the horizon. I will not give you the Chinese names. I have copied them, I think, correctly. We were able, Celeste Richard, myself, and Dr. Gao from China shipped us 10 of what he describes as the best of these out of thousands to the US 2 years ago. They've been in quarantine in the US Government Agricultural Department in Maryland, and they're going to be released. And Mark Crawford, whose name I forgot, excuse me, Mark, is going to pick them up, and we're going to propagate them. So in the near future, we will have access to summer blooming besides Camellia azalea. They're all Camellia azalea hybrids, at least these are. Now that's a spectacular red. Here's a little different formed red. Here's one that you can sort of see how its parentage. You got Camellia azalea, which gives it summer blooming characteristic, and that it will bloom more than once in the season. And the Tama Beauty that produced the white, uneven, but a white edge to it. The name translates to 4 seasons. We're unclear what names we're going to give some of these flowers because this is a good example of Camellia azalea dakagora, but there's no way we're going to use that. Ms. Ziozana's Summer Dream as a marketing tool. Maybe just Summer's Dream, or but look at the beautiful pink formal double flower. And of course, we don't know how they're going to grow in Northern California, Southern California, and Georgia, but they should bloom multiple times a year, and they will be blooming in the summer. And this is one that translates This is interesting because it's C. azalea times C. reticulata, Dr. Parks. Beautiful big bloom. And that, of course, is myself, and that's Professor Gao, or Dr. Gao. He's the one who we have had contact with and has helped us get these into the camellia world, or will be in the camellia world. And China's very, very thrilled to have us have them. We hope we'll have others in the pipeline once the quarantines are over. And I want to thank you for your attendance tonight, and open up to